Communication Connection, Part 3, is 10 to 15 minutes, 12 and a half minutes, give a yellow sign. Okay? Please welcome Tim.
Even if you don't do formal presentations, most likely at some time in your business world, where you are, somebody's going to ask you to do something often. Right? You have that happen? Somebody just comes up to you with a question.
Yes.
Yeah, this is where you're not. Okay. It happens. You come up with a question, and there you are, all of a sudden, you've got to answer this question. And there's one mistake most people make when they're doing off-the-cuff speaking. And it's a normal thing. Because what happens is somebody asks you a question, you haven't had a chance to prepare, you haven't had a chance to get ready for it, and all of a sudden you just and you can't quite figure out what to say. And you think about what you're supposed to say, and you think about, maybe I should say, no. What if? No, that's not going to work. Maybe, no. What if I, and then you say the wrong thing. You ever done that? Well, maybe you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
It just builds up, right? And that's because you're making the big mistake that I've made, many people have made, and until I had the help of my Toastmasters mentors, I didn't understand what was going on. But here's kind of how it works. Just picture this. Just picture how your mind kind of works. Basically, your mind is like a flowing stream. Does that make sense? All these thoughts, all these ideas kind of flowing along. And that's where your mind kind of is. All these different thoughts and all these ideas flowing along all the time. Now, you can pay attention to them or not. It's up to you. But they're still there. They're flowing along. Everything is fine. Your mind's going. You're thinking. Everything's great. And all of a sudden, somebody asks that question, and it's like you put a dam right across that stream. You just stop right there. So all that water that was flowing along so nice and now doesn't go any further. It just stops right there. And it happened, all of a sudden it just stops. The thinking stops, the mind stops, everything shuts down, and nothing's going any further. You've got a dam and a bunch of water that wants to flow behind it. What happens to the water pressure behind the dam? It goes up. Exactly. It goes up. So the pressure starts to build. And maybe you've experienced this. You're going through, you cut off the only question that you answer you've heard in your head yet, and you say, no, I can't do that. So then the next thought comes in. What if I said this? No, that's not going to work either. And the pressure starts to build. And you start to freak out a little bit. And maybe you're calm and you keep it inside. But you start to get a little bit nervous, a little bit more tense. Because you got to say something. But every time you try to say something, you stop. Here's another question. What happens to the water behind the dam? It starts to rise. Thank you, Emily. It starts to rise. So your thoughts start to rise. And the problem is, the more your thoughts rise, you just put another dam on top of it and block that thought. Pressure builds, thoughts are rising, another dam on top, another, no. And finally the dam explodes, and all these thoughts and ideas all come out at once, and it's just a disaster. Because you didn't go with your first thought. First thought. That's the magic thing. You just go with that first thought, you get that first thought out there, at least you're saying something as opposed to nothing. That's the challenge of off the cuff, saying something in a high-pressure situation. Have you ever had a situation where you had a first thought, you didn't say it, and then after a while you finally said something that was much worse than what you could have said if you just gotten it out the first time? You know what I'm talking about? Exactly. If you get that first thought out, it's out there. It's out there in the world. It's okay. You can always change it because something happens. When that water starts to flow and starts to go, that first thought naturally will lead to a next thought. Your first thought will lead to a next thought. Your next thought's a place you can add a few more details in. A few more details about what you're talking about, a few more details about what the situation is. And then that next thought, you get all these next thoughts, finally, eventually, you may come up with a new thought. It's like that water, that stream coming along, splits in a new channel, splits in a new channel, splits in a new channel. And you get these new thoughts. Have you had that happen before? You get new thoughts and new ideas when you're thinking about things? Yeah, you get new ideas. They split into new channels. Think of it like this. Go back to the example I had at the beginning. I had a situation where, with my boss, he wanted to book hotels in New York City. He'd always book at the last moment. They're really popular hotels, so they'd never be available. And I couldn't book them. So week after week went by, he'd never get the hotels he wanted. Right? When he called me in his office and said, why am I not getting my hotels? My first thought was to say, well, book them further in advance. Right? Book them further in advance. Yeah. That was my first thought. But I thought, no, I can't say that. It's too pushy. So I had all these other thoughts. What I finally came out with was, I'll book them when they're available. Which solved no problems. Which didn't help. Which didn't really solve anything at all. But if I let that first thought go, maybe my next thought might have been, okay, well, I'll book them further in advance. That's my first thought. And then maybe book multiple hotels. Book multiple hotels. I just cancel the ones you don't need. You've always got a hotel. Problem solved. No issue. And then maybe I have a new thought that comes out of that, like, well, if you don't like that, maybe just stay in less popular hotels. It's just going to create too much drama. We can book at the last moment. It'll be a lot cheaper, and it'll look better on your books. But that could be new thought, and other new thoughts can come out. So first thought leads to next thought, leads to new thought. And that's how this process works. That's what the whole off-the-cuff situation is. And if you just get that first thought out, then you can talk. Then it's a lot simpler. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Okay. What I'd like to do now is to bring up somebody, a volunteer. And if I get no volunteers, I'll get what Ken calls a voluntold. Or I draft somebody from the audience. Don't need to get that desperate yet. And just get you up here, and quickly going to give a quick scenario and go over first thought, next thought, and new thought. And while that person is doing that, what I want you to do is listen in the audience and listen for what is the first thought? What is the first thought that person comes up with?
All right. Oh, good. Is there a voluntold over there? I didn't want to be.
What you want to do? Okay.
I think it was simultaneous. Are you up for it?
Okay. Well, hold off yet. Just a little bit. But I'm glad to get so much enthusiasm. I appreciate it. That is wonderful. I'm getting so much enthusiasm. I don't even realize people are about my wow. I got people volunteering. I'm not even realizing it. Anyway, first thought. Always think about the first thought, the next thought, and any new thoughts that come out. All right. Now we're going to have a wrestle off for a person to come up here, and 2 falls out of 3.
Just go ahead.
Lady first.
Come on up here. All right. Here's what's going to happen. I have a little mini experience here. And what you're simply going to do is you're going to talk for a minute. I'm going to hold the green card.
No, this was just.
Or,
I'm told this one.
Okay, if you get.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't want to control it.
No, it's all right. It's all right. If you don't think you can do a minute, how about 30 seconds? 30 seconds?
Okay. I thought it was just a word association thing.
No, you need to do an off-the-cuff talk.
Oh, wow.
Off-the-cuff thing. But I'm glad you volunteered.
Adventurous here. Okay.
That was your
No,
first
that's
thought.
not what I thought it was.
That was
my
your
first thought.
That was your first thought to go up here and volunteer, and it was the right thought. Make it really, really simple.
Can we always make mistakes? All right.
No. It's an important thing because someday you're going to have to go in a situation where you need to be doing off-the-cuff talking. It's important to practice it. You practice it, you get better at it.
I want to come here and develop my presence. Okay.
Exactly. There you go.
I can do
All
this.
right. 30 seconds, or you feel like you can do it for a full minute, or 30 seconds to say. Whatever you feel more comfortable with.
I'll go with 30 seconds.
30 seconds. All right. 30 seconds. I'm going to hold the green card, and then you're going to be done. Quickly. Here's the situation. You're a secretary. Just like I said, your boss basically flies to New York City, books at the last moment, stays in the most popular hotels, You can't book them because they're the most popular hotels. They're always booked up. He never gives you any time to book them. One day, so he's not getting his hotels for weeks. One day he comes out to you and says, why am I not getting my hotels? And you say,
Because you're not using Expedia. And so let's go look up the websites that offer different packages for different times so that we can get it discounted. And we can do that when they're occupied, and we can get those rooms that are available. So let's go look up a new project and find another solution instead of just calling at random at different hotels.
okay. That's good. Thank you. All right. Great. Thank you. All right. So, want you now to get amongst yourselves, your friends, your neighbors soon to be your friends, and just talk over what you just heard. And just think of it. What is the first thought? What were the next thoughts? What were any new thoughts that came out of it? Take about a minute to do that. And any other ideas or thoughts you have about that too. Take about a minute to do that, and I'll fly back after a minute.
We can't talk with you
People
about.
get
Well,
together.
the first thought that
talk
came
together,
out was
great,
you didn't use
talk together.
Expedia, which was
Fantastic.
an interesting first thought because it would help that person get a hotel room. And then the following thoughts were that way we can look at different packages, which was another interesting follow-up thought. Packages to different times would allow more to have a number of contingencies, and being that they're packages, they'd be self-contained, and you knew that he would be covered in all those cases.
And there's other websites that are on.
Well, but you didn't say that. We're talking about what you said. So you're talking
Well,
about
no, I
Expedia?
did say other websites that offer this kind of thing. That's what I was thinking.
Right. So,
Because the unsold hotel rooms go up, and they're like 80%
so
off.
we're talking about what you said, right? So what you said was we should use Expedia, we should look for packages, and that would help you get the rooms when you need them without waiting for the last minute. Did you hear anything else?
Well, I'd like to not only talk about what she said, but how she said it. I think
Clap
what
once if you can
we're
hear me.
focusing
Clap
on,
once
well, maybe
if
I
you
didn't
can
hear
hear
you
me.
thought.
Clap once.
First thought. Let's hear what you said.
Clap
I'd
once.
like to give my first thought.
Clap once.
Is that the one?
I'd like to give my first thought.
Okay,
And one more time.
he's gonna go.
All right. Let's go with, what are you talking about over here? What do you think the first thought was?
That effective way of telling someone that the hotels that we like.
Okay.
Now look, you gotta do, you wanna stay at.
First thought, you're not going to get the hotels that you like.
No, you gotta get the Waldorf Astoria or the
Okay.
Ice Hotel
Okay.
last minute.
Do people agree with that? Was that the first thought? You think that was the first thought? Yes?
No.
No? No?
First thought was you didn't use Expedia.
You didn't use Expedia. All right. You agree with that?
My first thought is that she suggested was get an internet site that you can
Get an internet site that you can use. Okay. Was it Expedia, and did that lead to a next thought of get an internet site you can use?
No,
or was
somehow
Expedia
this
came first?
bundle, figure out what the package is,
Okay.
perhaps gonna
Okay.
get you there.
So Expedia maybe was the first thing mentioned, and there were some other. What were some other next thoughts then? Was one of them you mentioned was get an internet package or?
Well, yeah,
get
perhaps
that?
bundle, find out what it is,
Okay.
he's looking for, and
Okay. And then figure it out that way.
Yeah,
Okay.
you
Some
check
different ideas.
if he wants a high, room with a view or a room near this.
Internet bundle. All right. Any other next thoughts that came out of that? I know it was kind of a short term, and thank you for doing that. It was great. Any other next thoughts that came out of that? Any new thoughts that came out of that in that amount of time? Or those kind of the two things? What were you talking about? It's okay if you repeat. It's all right.
Would you like to speak?
No.
Well, we talked about how she's a little tired, and then we talked about Toastmasters a little bit.
Okay.
But we didn't talk about the speech, but it only lasted maybe like 5 or 10
Hey,
seconds.
a new thought just came out of this whole talk here, which is wonderful. Anyone talking about anything related to what I was saying here? Yes.
I think what initially popped out to me is that it's because we don't use Expedia came across as maybe too forceful. That's just
Okay.
my thought.
Okay. Okay.
It was more kind of just thinking ahead, maybe saying something like, you know, the Plaza and the Waldorf Astoria, they book up 4 months in advance, no exceptions.
Right.
So if you do have some trips that we can actually plan that far in advance, those are definitely some hotels we can look at, but these are also really nice hotels
Okay.
that accept reservations, you know, a month before.
Right. So maybe too much in advance, which brings up the question really that you might be wondering. So Tim, wait a minute. I mean, if I get that first thought out and it's not the best thought, what happens then? How does that go? I get this first thought out, it's a horrible thought, and all of a sudden everything just falls apart. And that can happen, which is why it's so important to practice. And why Toastmasters is your place to practice off-the-cuff talks. In Toastmasters, it's called table topics. And you get up and you simply practice getting out your first thought. And you can get feedback from people. Well, what did you think about that first thought? How did that work for you? Did it connect? People say, well, if you did this would be better. So the next time you try it, maybe with that then. So as you go through it, you become better at getting out better first thoughts. As you get out better first thoughts, you get out better next thoughts. Better next thoughts, you get out better new thoughts. So that's why Toastmasters is such a benefit and so important. If you're really going to do any situations that come up all the time, as I heard you say, nod your head, agree, then you practice that here safely. So when you do get in a situation with your job or your business or some high-pressure situation, you come up with the right first thought. So that stream flows, but it also flows in a way that everybody can agree with, everybody goes along with. Well, so far talking about off the cuff, but if you do a situation that repeats a lot, actually, it's really much more of a feedback situation. Now, feedback is 3 steps, and it's the 3rd step that most people forget about, and that causes the most problems.